There's something haunting about certain people. They walk into rooms and chaos follows. Drama clings to them like smoke. Yet others glide to the same spaces, untouched by the storms that seem to hunt specific souls. What makes one person a beacon for emotional predators, while another remains invisible to their radar? The answer lies buried in places most refuse to look. Carl Jung spent decades mapping the hidden territories of the human psyche. What he discovered about toxic attraction will shake everything you thought you knew about relationships. This isn't about learning clever comebacks or building thicker skin. This is about understanding why your inner world sends signals that certain people can smell from miles away. Like bloodhounds tracking a scent you didn't know you were leaving. Picture this. Two people work in the same office. Same environment. Same challenges. Same difficult colleagues. One constantly finds themselves caught in office politics, defending their choices, explaining their worth. The other seems to float above it all, somehow exempt from the games that consume everyone else. The difference isn't luck. It's not about being tougher or more confident. It's about something far more subtle and infinitely more powerful. Jung called it the unconscious signal system. Every unhealed wound you carry broadcasts a frequency. Every insecurity you hide creates a vibration. Every need for approval sends out an invisible invitation. Toxic people don't consciously choose their targets. They're drawn to these frequencies like moths to flame. Without realizing it, you're advertising your vulnerabilities. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. The people who trigger you most intensely are often reflecting your own rejected parts. That manipulative colleague who makes your blood boil, they might be showing you the ruthless ambition you buried. The controlling friend who exhausts you, perhaps they're mirroring your own desperate need for certainty. Jung understood that what we resist in others often lives within us, not because we're bad people, but because we're human beings who've learned to hide certain aspects of ourselves. The shadow isn't evil. It's simply the parts of you that didn't fit the image you needed to project to survive. But here's the twist. Suppressing these parts doesn't make them disappear. It makes them leak out in ways that attract exactly the wrong people. Toxic individuals survive on emotional reactivity. Your anger feeds them. Your desperate explanations nourish them. Your need to prove you're right give them power. Every time you take their bait, you're providing exactly what they need. They throw out small provocations like fishing lures, a passive-aggressive comment here, a subtle dig there, a moment of calculated coldness. Then they wait. When you bite, when you react, when you lose your center, they win, because now the focus shifts from their behavior to your response. Suddenly you're the one who's too sensitive or overreacting. The game is rigged, and most people don't even realize they're playing. Real boundaries don't start with other people. They start within you. Most people think boundaries are about saying no to others. But Jung knew better. The strongest boundaries are the ones that protect your inner world from invasion. When you need everyone to like you, you're defenseless. When you require external validation to feel worthy, you're vulnerable. When you fear conflict more than you value truth, you're exposed. Toxic people can sense these internal gaps instantly. They know exactly which buttons to push because you've unconsciously shown them where the buttons are. Internal boundaries mean knowing who you are regardless of who approves or disapproves. They mean being willing to lose relationships rather than lose yourself. This isn't about becoming cold or indifferent. It's about developing such a solid sense of self that external storms can't shake your foundation. Now comes the part that terrifies most people. To become truly free from toxic attraction, you must face your own capacity for darkness. Jung insisted that knowing your own shadow is the best defense against other shadows. This means acknowledging that you too have selfish impulses. You too have manipulative tendencies. You too have the capacity for cruelty. Not because you're a bad person, but because you're a complete person. The difference between you and toxic individuals isn't the presence or absence of darkness. It's consciousness. When you acknowledge your shadow, you can choose how to relate to it. When you deny it, it controls you from the unconscious. And unconscious shadows are what toxic people exploit. Something remarkable happens when you integrate your shadow, when you stop projecting your wounds onto others, when you develop internal boundaries. When you refuse to feed the drama, you become energetically invisible to emotional predators, not because you're hiding, but because you're no longer broadcasting the signals they hunt for. You're no longer wounded prey. You're a whole person who doesn't need their games. They can sense this shift immediately. Your energy becomes too solid, too integrated, too complete for their purposes. They need chaos to thrive. They need insecurity to exploit. They need reactivity to feed on. When you offer none of these things, they simply move on. This transformation doesn't just repel toxic people. It attracts healthy ones. When you're no longer driven by unconscious needs and fears, you become magnetic to others who've done their own inner work. Your relationships deepen. Your professional life stabilizes. Your energy stops getting drained by people who don't deserve access to it. You begin to understand what Jung meant when he said that the individual's transformation changes the psychology of the collective. By healing your own shadows, you contribute to healing the world. This isn't a one-time revelation. It's a daily practice of consciousness. Every time you feel triggered, ask yourself, what is this person reflecting in me? Every time you want to react, pause and ask, am I feeding the drama? Every time you feel the need to prove yourself, remember, I don't need anyone's approval to exist. The path to freedom from toxic people isn't about changing them. It's about changing the internal signals that attract them. It's about becoming so psychologically integrated that you're no longer interesting to emotional predators. Jung's gift to humanity was showing us that we're not victims of our unconscious patterns. We can bring the darkness into the light. We can integrate what we've rejected. We can transform our wounds into wisdom. When you do this work, toxic people don't just avoid you. You stop seeing them as powerful. You recognize them as wounded individuals acting out their own unconscious patterns. This recognition doesn't make you vulnerable to them. It makes you free from them, because you're no longer unconsciously participating in their games. You're awake, and awakened people don't get trapped in the shadows others cast. They've learned to dance with their own darkness, and in that dance, they find a light that no one can extinguish. This transformation creates waves that extend far beyond your personal relationships. When you stop being reactive, you inspire others to examine their own patterns. When you refuse to engage in toxic dynamics, you give others permission to do the same. Your workplace becomes calmer. Your family gatherings shift from battlegrounds to genuine connections. Your friendships deepen as you attract people who value authenticity over drama. The energy you once spent defending yourself now flows toward creativity, growth, and meaningful contribution. You become a living example of what's possible when someone chooses consciousness over unconsciousness. Thanks for watching. See you next video.